Well, welcome back to the When I Heard This podcast. My name is Nate Robinsoff, and I'm here with Pastor Joseph Tillman, MDiv, soon to be D-Man. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm well.
Good.
It's been a long weekend, but I'm good.
A long
Weekend.
3-day weekend.
Yes. Yeah, we had.
I'm never going to give it up.
No, you're never going. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. So it's busy during this time of year for a church, but it's awesome. So.
Yep, we are continuing to talk about Easter, even though it's after Easter.
Yes, sir.
Even though apparently in a different year, it would be fine. Because Easter started early this year.
No, but Easter's always on a Sunday. But yeah, you're talking about just the time of the year.
Yeah,
you're right.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
So in most years, you're right. We'd be leading up to Easter at this point.
Yeah, but not this time.
No, sir.
Nope. We're just putting an episode out afterwards.
Yes, we are.
Yep. Oh, well. Go to Patreon, $5. Like, subscribe, share, comment, follow, download. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at When I Heard This Podcast, and X and locals at When I Heard This. Tell everyone that you know about the show. Ring the notification bell so that you never miss an episode.
Well done.
Boom.
Yes, sir.
All right, more Easter.
Here we go.
Okay, so this time, I don't believe you.
Okay, that's a very blanket
At
statement.
all.
All right. Okay.
So
Why are we doing this podcast?
Because other people might.
All right. Okay, that's fair. That's fine. You don't have to ever believe me. It's fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't believe you right now.
All right. Okay.
But I might.
All right.
Later.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so the first question is not believing you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have been extremely reliably informed by the good peoples on TikTok.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
You got to love the scholastic work that's
Yes.
going on TikTok nowadays.
Yeah, from people who look like when they turn the record off of their phones,
right?
They're going to go kill themselves.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've been informed by these very reliable people that Easter and basically all other related religious holidays originally started as pagan things.
Okay.
So, what say ye?
I would say that there is no evidence that that's actually true.
All right, well.
Yeah. And so, for example, some people...
A lot of dead people told me it was.
For example, people will take like almost any Christian holiday and they'll say, well, Constantine created it, who was the emperor of Rome.
I thought he was a Christian.
Yeah. And yes. And that, he had a conversion, and then he basically took every pagan holiday and made it a Christian holiday. It's kind of a thought process.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so there's no evidence of that. And so the idea of Easter...
Where's your evidence that there's no evidence?
All right. So let me discuss. So the fact that Easter is often assumed that it is derived from a pagan goddess. Okay. Named Istar or Easter, and who was celebrated as the goddess of the spring. Okay. And this is very specific to the Saxons of Northern Europe. Okay. So in other words, you don't find this tradition anywhere else.
Okay.
And so according to this theory, Istar or Easter was the goddess of the east. Okay, so where the sun rises.
Oh,
yeah. And so it's that she has a symbol of a rabbit.
All right.
Which symbolized fertility. Okay.
In the form of eggs.
And then the eggs would be attached to that. Okay. Right. And so therefore the Easter bunny's pagan, the Easter eggs are pagan, The word Easter itself is pagan. The holiday is fully pagan. And we need to ditch the name, the eggs, the bunny, and just call it Resurrection Day.
And Jesus.
Yeah.
And get rid of Jesus.
No, keep Jesus.
Oh.
Yeah. You can keep Jesus. And Jesus rising, but it needs to be separated from this pagan stuff, presumably, of the word Easter and of the rabbits and of the eggs. Okay?
Okay.
So this is kind of like the myth, if you want to say that, the myth that's out there.
Of why Christians celebrate Easter.
Of why it's pagan in its origins.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Of why Easter is pagan
so
in its
the idea
origins.
is that we grafted our Jesus stuff onto a pagan holiday and assumed it.
Correct. Okay. And then we, including the rabbit and the eggs.
All right.
Right?
So none of that's true.
None of that's true. Okay. So there is one source, only one. It's from an 8th century monk, and who brings up this idea of this goddess named Istar or Easter. And so,
pretty similar.
Yeah, pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into the name in a second. Okay. But there's one goddess or there's one source, this 8th century monk, and so he actually says that there is a month that has a name, which is now translated as Pascal month. Pascal is what we translate as Passover.
Oh.
Okay.
But that is Jesus stuff.
Mm-hmm. So what he's saying is that there's a month called Easter, okay, and Easter, and that name is now being translated as Pascal month.
Okay.
Okay.
All
Follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So we have Easter, but now it's being referred to as the Jesus thing.
Okay.
So this is the Jesus group co-opting, what was former a pagan month. Okay.
Okay.
And which was once called after a goddess of theirs named Istar.
Okay.
Okay. In whose honor feasts were celebrated in that month.
Passover.
Mm-hmm. Or April.
Last Supper.
The month is April that he's referring to here.
Okay.
So the month of April is derived from Istar month or Pascal month, as he's referring to it here. And now they designate that Pascal season by her name, calling the joys of the new rite of the time-honored name of the old observance. And so what he's saying is, hey, there is this month called Easter, and I don't deny the fact that he's maybe right on this. Now, he's the only source we have on this.
Okay.
But I don't know why he would just necessarily make it up. And so there's probably a month called Easter or Easter, and that's what we now know as April.
Okay.
And that is when they celebrated the coming of spring or the spring equinox. And so they celebrated this spring, okay? But there is no connection at all of there having anything to do with bunnies or eggs, or that there was even this worship of a pagan deity.
Okay.
Okay. And so so I guess the movement would be, let's say there's a pagan goddess.
All right.
Okay. And that this goddess was came known as like the goddess of spring.
Mm-hmm.
They named a month after her.
Okay.
Which wouldn't be crazy.
Right.
All right. We name days of the week after gods, right? We have Thursday. And so that's named after Thor's day.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Why did we do that?
Because we took Norse mythology and we started taking the names of those gods and naming the days of the week of that. So remember, like you've seen the movie Thor.
Yeah.
His father.
Thor, the god of thunder?
Yeah, god of thunder, right?
Yeah.
And so you remember his
Odin?
Yeah.
All right.
And so that actually so that name is where we get an idea of Wednesday from. And so, yeah.
That doesn't track.
Yeah. And so there's this, in other words, we've taken, culture has always taken things and named it after certain aspects, especially in this day and time where you took deities and named it after deities. So for example, if I'm going to go do something on Thursday,
Literally anything?
doesn't mean that I'm going to go worship Thor on that day.
Yeah, it does. Pagan.
Hey, that's all that I am. We're all pagans. We do things on Thursday. Or if I go to church on Thursday, I'm not going to worship Thor.
No one goes to church on Thursday.
We just talked about Maundy Thursday last week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah, but that's to eat.
yeah.
Thor ate. Pagan.
I'm just a pagan. We're all pagans. And so let's say there's this goddess. They've named a month after her. It coincided with the same time period of the resurrection of Jesus.
Okay.
And so Easter. That's where we have Easter from.
All right. So the eggs and the bunnies.
There is absolutely no connection
and the Reese's
of
Pieces.
that at all. Right. Like the first time we really see the idea of eggs is the best that I know of.
Okay.
Is during the medieval times.
That's when they invented eggs?
No, so they invented eggs.
Oh.
That's just when eggs began to be used.
With Easter.
With Easter.
Okay.
Yeah, as like a celebration. So,
do eggs symbolize anything in the Jesus story?
No.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, like some people may refer to it as, again, the idea of new life and that kind of thing. But for me,
okay.
Like if we're going, like, you have kids that are doing Easter egg hunts, for example, right? So they're doing Easter egg hunts, or you have the Easter bunny come to the house and bring candy to your kids.
Okay. Yeah.
Y'all done this, right? Maybe you didn't growing up. I don't know.
But I didn't have fun. There was no fun.
Like, okay. So for me, it was like, every Easter you wake up that Sunday morning and you got a huge thing of candy.
Oh, like the giant baskets.
Yeah, the giant baskets.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they would say the Easter bunny brought you the candy.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So none of that's pagan.
No, it's not pagan. It's just candy.
Okay.
For
so
kids. It's just fun, in other words.
It's just fun.
Now.
So what if it happens to be connected to pagan stuff?
Yeah. I
mean, what if that's true?
But there's nowhere. Now, again, there's the connection between the name, of this possible deity.
No, what I'm saying is, what if the
eggs and the
bunny stuff only came from that story that you just read about the goddess?
But there's nothing here in the story that even talks about eggs and a bunny. And literally that's like what I read was it. Like that's all you got until the 19th century. Okay.
So
all that you got in terms of this idea of Easter and the pagan origins.
Why did all that get attached to Easter then?
Yeah. So, you remember there's an author, Grimm, like Grimm's Tales.
Yeah. The Brothers Grimm,
or the Grimm's Tales that were
what are they called?
I think it's Grimm's Tales, isn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't read.
Yeah, it's like
anything ever.
So this author in the 19th century,
he's
actually the one that made this connection.
Oh, okay.
Or made a full or blown connection between, or I won't say made a connection. He's the one that really created the myth that we buy into today that says all of this stuff is pagan, including the name. Well, again, we're using Thursday on our calendars. I don't think that makes us pagan worshipers for doing so.
Okay.
And so all I'm saying is the fact that there's nothing in any kind of primary source material that is making this obvious connection between a goddess and bunnies and eggs.
Okay, so on Halloween, all of the fun candy stuff, Christians, not all of them, but have more of a problem with all that candy stuff than Easter candy stuff.
Sure.
Or any other day's candy stuff. So what's the difference?
Yeah, I think for a lot of Christians is the fact that...
Is that 100% connected to something pagan?
Well, I think, okay, so here's what I would say is that what I think a lot of Christians believe is that Halloween celebrates darkness.
Okay.
Whereas something like Easter bunny and eggs is not celebrating anything of darkness. It's, so it's not, I'm not saying it's godly, but at the same time, I'm also not saying it's this sense of, darkness or death, which unfortunately Halloween, that's what's kind of gotten wrapped up into Halloween. And so I think for me...
Is Halloween the holiday originally pagan or evil?
No, I don't think so. I just think that's what it has developed into.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like for me and other groups have attached to that day as a day of, whether it's worshiping the dead or whether it is connected to other kind of witchcraft or sorcery or other pagan forms of worship. I think that day has been kind of hijacked, if you want to put it that way.
Okay.
By other groups that has made it as dark as it is. Because like the reality is like there's some families like their kids are dressing up like little princesses and pirates or something, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with that. And so, for like our church, okay, so I'll put it like in our context. The way we handle that is we don't celebrate Halloween. We do have like a fall festival that's around that same period of time. And if kids want to come dressed up like princesses or farmers or pirates, or go for it, right? And then like at our church, just a couple Saturdays ago.
No Satan costumes?
Yeah, no Satan costumes.
Okay.
And so, or anything real gory.
Okay.
And so a couple Saturdays ago, we had an Easter egg hunt at the church.
Okay.
Completely cool with that.
I wasn't invited.
Yes, you were.
Okay, fine, I was.
Yeah. Because the whole church was. And so... But I think that's, so like that's how we handle those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what makes Halloween different from pagan Easter.
That's not actually worshiping any kind of pagan deity.
A little bit more eviler.
Yeah. It's not even, it has nothing to do with the worshiping of, and I think that's the thing with Easter, it has nothing to do with the worshiping of a pagan goddess.
But are there not some Christians who think that the eggs and the candy part of Easter shouldn't happen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what's their reasoning?
Well, one, they either do think it is attached to pagan worship, or two, they don't want it to take away or distract from the real reason.
Okay.
Right. Which would be the resurrection of Jesus.
Right.
So I guess they would have the same perspective then of Christmas, where they wouldn't want to have gifts or a Christmas tree.
Oh.
Because you would take away from Christ's birth.
Okay.
And so, and I bring that up because it is interesting, because sometimes you have people they'll celebrate Easter stuff or not celebrate Easter stuff, but celebrate Christmas stuff.
Right.
And I'm always kind of like, well, what's the difference here?
Giving people stuff is pagan.
Yeah. And so, but I think that for me, it's more like a Romans 14 issue, which in Romans 14 basically says, hey, honor one another, respect one another in matters of conscience. And so, in other words, if someone's conscious, like if they're bothered, right, by Easter eggs, by the Easter bunny, then you don't have that person does not need to feel, condemned or put down. Let them have that belief. And if someone else believes it's completely okay, don't put that person down. Let them hold to that. In other words, what they're okay with in their own conscience. I mean,
do you treat Halloween the same way?
Yeah. In other words, I would never mandate. So as a pastor, I would never stand up in the pulpit and say, our church is taking this position.
Okay, about Halloween.
Like, I am
Okay.
making this a mandatory thing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't celebrate Halloween. Like, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I feel like if I was to celebrate Halloween, I'd be the evilest whatever I could be. Right?
Right.
Go all out.
I mean, go big or go home.
Right.
Yeah. I get
do it. Do it.
Right. And do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. And so, yeah, so that's how I think we probably should handle it as Christians, instead of like slinging mud at each other and that kind of thing for what they're doing or not doing. It's a matter of conscience. Let's just let people decide. I mean, the reality is Paul is talking about idol worship, like meat that's been sacrificed to idols, and how that's like, you can eat of it or not eat of it. That's up to you.
Oh,
If you want to, eat of it. If you don't want to, cool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's dealing with that in 1 Corinthians 9, 8, 9, and 10. And so, like, if Paul can say that about meat that's been sacrificed to idols,
Okay.
I think we can take that position about candy and eggs.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean,
I never heard that verse before.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like 1 Corinthians 8, Paul's dealing specifically with meat that's been sacrificed to idols.
Yeah.
And then he's like, but you're not worshiping a god or a demon.
Yeah. You're just eating food.
You're just eating food.
Okay.
But if your conscience is bothered by that,
Okay.
you don't have to. You don't you're cool. You're fine. Don't eat it. But if you're fine, go ahead and eat it. And so
Okay.
I think we need to have more of that perspective, instead of like instilling fear, that we're going to catch a demon or something if I go for an Easter egg hunt.
Well, no Easter for me. Because it's all evil, apparently.
I love what you take away from these conversations.
Yeah. Did Jesus really die?
Yes. And I believe that's a pretty solid historical fact that's not only attested to in Scripture, in our Bible, but also in extra biblical sources.
You weren't there. You don't know.
You're right. I was not there. So, so Josephus, a Jewish historian.
Oh, you were there.
In the late first. Yes, that's me. I've been alive for a really long time. Aging very well. And so, but Josephus, the end of the 1st century, he's a Jewish historian, and he's writing about the fact that Jesus was a literal man that was on earth, and that he did die on a cross, that he was crucified. Right. Okay?
Killing someone's easy.
Right. We have a Roman historian in the 2nd century who's attesting to the same thing. And so I feel like it's pretty well attested to.
Was he
Jesus
bragging?
Was a I don't think he's bragging as much as he's just like,
yeah, we killed him.
Like, yeah, there was this guy, he had a following, he was killed.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there's because this guy's writing about the whole Roman Empire. So for him to even mention Jesus, to be honest with you, is a pretty big deal. Like,
okay,
that's happening in a little small random part of the Roman Empire, and yet he still records the fact that it happened. And so, yeah, I think the historical evidence, the historical fact of Jesus dying is pretty undeniable.
But that's not the important part.
Yeah, I mean, because if he just stayed dead, he was just dead.
Right. It was just a guy that got dead.
Yeah, they killed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which they did all the time.
They did crucify
in the
a lot.
same way to
Mm-hmm.
lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, so this other part of Jesus and Easter and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so did he really come back to life?
Yes.
You weren't there. You don't know.
You're right. I was just seeing how much I can get away with just answering it as yes and leaving it there.
Right.
Okay, so a few different reasons I'd say yes.
All right.
Number one is that in all 4 Gospels, the initial witnesses to the empty tomb were women. And to us, in our modern lens of reading, No big deal. That doesn't catch us, off guard or anything. But back in that day and time,
Of course it shouldn't catch us off guard.
right? Of course not. And so
Women are just as capable of noticing that someone's dead as we are.
okay, yes. And even back then, that
Moving
was the case. All right. Stick with me for the historical context of this.
Okay.
Though. All right.
Do I even want to hear this?
Yes, you do. So women were not viewed as reliable witnesses during this day and time. Okay.
Okay.
And so, like, their reports, their eyewitness accounts held no validity in or weight in courts or in documents or any, like, it just, their word didn't matter. Okay.
So that's why there's no women in the Bible.
Just what? No, there are women in the Bible.
There's like 3 of them.
And they're all named Mary.
And they're all named Mary.
No, there's lots of women in the Bible.
Yeah, no, there's not.
That's why the Bible is so cool.
Yeah, but all they ever did was get pregnant.
That's all? That's all they ever did.
Yep.
Yeah, like Mary Magdalene.
And screw over everyone forever. Eve.
Thanks, God.
Yeah.
And so, all right. But
we got to do an episode about women in the Bible.
We do need to do an episode about that because I think the Bible is...
God really hates them.
No.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't. No.
He really hates all of them.
No. Okay.
He talks about a couple of them and then he's like, okay, at church forever, shut up. Just come and sit down.
No, that's actually not true.
I mean, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get into it.
We will get into it.
All right, anyway. Did Jesus come back to life?
That's a whole different subject. Anyway, women not seen as reliable witnesses, okay, or reliable sources, and yet every gospel writer includes them as the initial ones who find the empty tomb.
Okay.
And so what I'm saying is,
so that's how we know it's BS.
If you were wanting, right, to try to convince someone of something, you would not include women as the witnesses.
Did women believe other women? Because you're supposed to believe all women.
I'm not going to even answer your question. All right, so for the fact that every gospel includes women as the eyewitness, as the initial eyewitnesses, is a huge statement. Because if they were just trying to create a story, like if they were making up a story, in other words, the writers of these gospels were making up a story, Jesus really didn't rise from the grave,
okay.
If they want to try to convince people he did, you would not include women in this story as the eyewitnesses.
There'd be like 500 men.
Right. And they would all be like, yeah we saw them.
Yeah, that were all separated into different interrogation rooms and all said the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So that's the first one.
All right.
All right. So the second thing is that the Romans actually believed his body was gone. Like, they believed that the body or that the tomb was empty.
When? At what point?
Initially. So in Matthew 28, it speaks about the fact that the guards came to the chief priest and informed them of, hey, that tomb's empty. And the chief priest then bribed them.
Wait, when is this?
So this is like...
So he dies, they stick him in there, and then they put a rock in front of it. And right, the guards are like, I don't think he's in there anymore.
No, okay, no. So, yeah, you're right. Okay. They kill him, put him in the grave. They were worried that his disciples may try to remove his body. So they put the stone over the tomb.
Why would the disciples want to remove his body?
They were concerned because they had already heard conversations and language of Jesus saying that he was going to rise in 3 days. Because he prophesied it.
So the Romans thought that the disciples were going to weekend at Bernie's Jesus around town?
I mean, I guess so. And so, but enough to where they put guards around him.
With sunglasses on?
Yes. That's exactly what they were concerned about.
I'm alive!
Here I am. And so,
Jesus, no, he can't talk. He's still kind of dead.
yeah. And so
He's got to take a bath.
so they put guards around him. Then an angel appears. Okay. Angel appears
To the guards?
To the guards.
Oh, okay.
First day, he appears. Stone rolls away. Guards freak out.
Okay.
Obviously. And then they're going off to report the fact that this tomb has been opened. It is empty. Jesus not there.
Okay.
Okay. And so right from the get-go, there is the knowledge by both Jews and Romans that this body is gone. Okay?
Okay.
Because if it was the other way around, right? Like, in other words, if this was just something the disciples were creating, they were just making up a story that the tomb is empty, but Jesus was really in the tomb, all they had to do was go to the tomb, open it, look. Jesus would have been in there. The Jews or the Romans could have seen that and been like, no, he's still here. Y'all are all liars. Because this tomb is it's near Jerusalem. So it's right near where Jesus was crucified. So
if he was gone,
right.
Why didn't they just find some other guy?
And been like,
look, he's still here.
Look, he's still here.
He didn't rise from the grave.
Yeah, maybe they should have thought about that.
They could have found some other dude that looked kind of like Jesus and poked holes in his head, and, like the crown, and whipped him a few times, and then stabbed him and stuck him in the tomb and been like, no, that's Jesus.
Right. Yeah, they could have. They didn't. And so
they're idiots. And they run the place, and they couldn't figure this out.
Right.
They killed so many people.
Right. And instead what they did was they bribed the guards and said, if anyone asks, tell them that his followers came and stole the body.
Why would that be a good explanation?
Because that would explain why the tomb's empty. But yeah, I agree, but it doesn't leave you with anything.
But if he happened to be alive, they'd be like, yeah, they stole his body because he's alive.
Right.
They didn't have to steal his body. Here
right.
He is.
And they knew they killed him. I mean, they ran a spear through him. So.
Well, that's a stupid explanation.
Yeah.
Someone was panicking.
Oh, there was definite panic. No question.
Idiots.
Every one of them. So.
They deserve for Jesus to come back to life. Because they're so stupid.
So you got women as witnesses. Romans and Jews believing his body is gone. There's the sheer number of witnesses that attest to the fact that they saw Jesus. So in 1 Corinthians 15, it speaks of over 500 witnesses seeing Jesus. And that's not including his apostles. All right.
Okay, so none of this, all of this is Bible stuff.
Sure.
So if I don't believe the Bible, then why would I think that someone came back to life?
Yeah, well, you didn't believe the Bible, but again, if it was really that big of a, like, if the body really was there, Romans or Jews, just, again, they could have proved that his body was still in the tomb.
Right.
Okay, one. But then second, the apostles are willing to die brutal deaths for it. Okay?
What?
Okay. So all the apostles are martyred. They're killed.
For believing that Jesus came back to life.
Correct. Now, that was their proclamation.
All of them?
All of them.
Except Judas.
Well, Judas because he killed himself.
Right.
Yeah. And so, yes, all the rest of them are martyred.
So he just got that out of the way early.
Yeah. Just said, forget those. No. But no, he was, I mean, obviously full of despair and everything else. But so Judas kills himself, but the apostles are all martyred later on. So, like, James is beheaded. The story goes with Peter that he's actually crucified upside down. There's stories of some of them actually being sawed in half. And so I
saw a woman sawed in half once.
Did you?
Yeah. She was fine.
Yeah, right. It wasn't real. And so this was real. And so there's the apostles are dying brutal deaths. Okay. Now, and I know that the initial thing can be, well, what if they were but people do die for things they're convinced of, right?
Right.
So what makes this difference? But they would have to be knowingly, willingly dying for a lie, because they're the ones propagating it.
Are all these martyrs in the Bible too?
I mean, are they martyred in the scriptures?
Yeah.
Just James. So
how do we know all the rest of them were?
Yeah, because you have truckloads of other historical evidence that speaks about their deaths.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is other evidence.
Yes.
That Jesus came back to life based on martyred disciples.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's an apologist named Sean McDowell. And Sean McDowell did his whole dissertation.
We forgive you.
They did a thing on Sean did his whole dissertation on the martyrdom of the apostles.
Okay.
So go check out, you can go check out Sean's, look up Sean's info, and he's got videos and that kind of stuff on it. So
okay.
Yeah, he's got his PhD, teaches.
So if I think all of that's not credible,
okay,
and the Bible's not credible,
right? Yeah, and
this is where the faith part, right?
Sure.
All right.
Absolutely. Because we could sit here and go into like 20 different things of why I think there's a valid argument, a reasonable argument to be made for the resurrection of Jesus. Because the question then is, well, if he didn't rise, like if he wasn't alive, what happened?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's where I'm supposed to have an answer.
Yeah.
Okay, if he didn't rise from the dead, what happened? He decayed really quickly.
In just a couple of days, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was 3 days.
3 days. I'll see if you catch it. So, all right. Yeah. And so, yeah, it was 3 days.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
You come around. Yeah. So I think all of this, like, because then you have the other theories, right? All right. Well, was his body stolen? And we've already talked about that.
Yeah.
And well, were they all hallucinating? Individuals have hallucinations. Groups of hundreds don't have hallucinations together. And so I think the hallucination theory is crazy.
You ever been to Burning Man?
Everybody's hallucinating, yeah. But, and then, you got the thought of, well, maybe he just wasn't fully dead. Maybe he was just mostly dead and got himself out of that tomb.
Right.
Right. But the reality is he has been beaten and crucified. And
they really wanted him dead too.
Yeah. And to ensure that he was dead, right? Spear goes through him.
Right.
And so through his side. And so yeah, he's dead.
Okay.
And let's say somehow crazy he wasn't dead. They took him, threw his body in there. He was just mostly dead. He'd have bled out.
He would have. Yep.
And he's definitely not getting.
He should have bled out
earlier. Well,
hours ago.
Yeah, and what he did more than likely was suffocate on his own blood, and so, and because the lungs would have just been full of it. So, anyways, but so he was definitely, and even like he's not getting out and like removing the stone or moving the stone away with like dislocated shoulders
But he's Jesus.
Yeah.
He could have just done his...
Oh, so you mean if he was God?
His magic.
Yes.
Oh, if he was God. Right, because he could have do all those stuff.
Things.
So he would have been able to come back to life.
And he would have been God.
Right. So I think you mentioned this kind of last time.
Okay.
But the Jews celebrate their own non-Jesus form of Easter.
Yes.
So what do they do for Easter?
Yeah. So again, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, in relating to like Easter, like that month, and kind of that Easter month now being referred to as a Pascal month.
Right.
Okay. So for the Jews, it's all about Passover in April.
Right.
So whereas for the Christians, it's about Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus. For the Jews, it's about Passover. And so for them, they're celebrating a Passover meal, what they would refer to as a Seder meal. And in the Seder meal, and we actually have this at our church. So it's not just Jews that celebrate it, but for Jews, they're celebrating a Passover meal, a Seder meal, and they have different items on the table. And it depends on how strict they are wanting to be in regards to the Seder meal. In other words, are they going to be fully strict to just what's there in Scripture, that's what they're going to have there? Or are they going to have other things as well?
The meal is in Scripture?
Yeah, the meal's in Scripture.
Like what you're supposed to eat?
Uh-huh, correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so for the Jews, you would have, again, the Passover lamb is the center point.
Right.
That's the remembering of the lamb that had to be killed. So you take the blood, put it on the doorpost, and that your firstborn son would not die as the angel of death passed over your house. And so you're celebrating Passover, the fact that death did not hit your house, and you're celebrating the fact of that ultimately is what led Israel being allowed to be free, set free from slavery out of Egypt.
So that's what they're celebrating?
Mm-hmm. They're celebrating freedom.
Freedom.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what their whole Passover is
correct.
about.
It's all about celebrating the fact of that God, through the miraculous, was able to deliver them out of Egypt.
So why do we do it?
People. So for Christians,
yeah.
So we look at.
Is it not illegal for us to do, or anti-Jesus?
Yeah, no. So actually, in the early church, they would have continued having Passover meals.
Okay, so that's if Jesus did it, then I guess we could do it.
Yeah, and because remember, all the early Christians were Jews initially,
right?
Okay, and so Paul and other writers don't forbid the keeping of Passover, for example, or even other festivals
by Christians.
They just don't want it to be forced upon them. So if you want to keep Passover, keep Passover. If you don't, you don't. And so for Christians, we look at it as also celebrating the fact that, yes, God delivered his people out of Egypt. That's awesome. But we also make a connection with Jesus, who Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5 is actually the Passover lamb.
Okay.
And so for us as Christians, we look at all of that and we make that connection. We see the symbols as how it connects to Jesus and his suffering as the Passover lamb.
It seems like the Jews connect more stuff to food than we do.
Yeah, I mean that's fair because they have a lot more festivals and feasts than we do. Yeah, that's a big part of their religion.
Are we going to do one at church?
Yes, we are.
All right.
Yep. So we have one April 22nd this year.
Cool.
Yeah, man.
All right. Well, lamb is delicious.
Agreed.
So they do. So how? Oh wait. How come why is their thing in April and ours is yesterday?
Yeah, because there's
or last week.
Yeah, yesterday. Yeah, because they're sticking with the Jewish calendar.
Okay.
So this is where it falls on the Jewish calendar, which is different than the calendar we use.
Is there supposed to be a connection between Jew freedom and Jesus coming back to life?
What do you mean?
Like Jesus did the Last Supper before he did all of his stuff.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So is there supposed to be a connection between the two festivals?
Yeah, so the connection is that, whereas Jews celebrate Passover every year, remembering God delivering them out of Egypt, we celebrate Easter remembering the Passover lamb who delivered us out of our own slavery, which was a slavery to sin.
Okay.
And so as Jews are celebrating freedom from being enslaved in Egypt, we're celebrating the fact that Jesus has overcome the power of sin and death and that we are no longer enslaved by those things anymore.
Jesus always had everything he did was related to something that Jews do.
Yes. Well, and it's what's interesting because remember, Jesus is a Jew, obviously, but then in Hebrews, it speaks about the fact that that which we see in the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, those are copies and shadows of the things that are going to be fulfilled in the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why in Jesus, we see the fulfillment of those things that are merely copies and shadows, symbols that are pointing to Jesus that are there in the Old Testament.
Okay, so a lot of Christians
Uh-huh.
only show up to church on Easter and Christmas Eve.
Fact. Mm-hmm.
So why do they do that?
So you've got some people that would still say they're Christians.
Because this is like a church joke, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the C&E Christians.
Yeah.
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 Christmas and Easter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so I think for some, they grew up in a church tradition and they may not be part of that tradition on a regular weekly basis anymore, but they still want to honor their religious upbringing. And they might even say their faith that they still presently have, that they don't go to church on a regular basis. But they want to come and be part of Easter, which is obviously, seen as like the highest day in the church calendar.
Even more than Christmas?
Even more than Christmas. Mm-hmm.
Because it's the whole point.
Yeah, because it's the whole point.
Okay.
Right? I mean, like, as Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15, if the resurrection didn't happen,
then Christmas didn't happen.
Then none of the rest of it matters. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, resurrection really is the most important thing that
I think it's the other way around.
Christians look at. What do you mean?
If Christmas didn't happen, then the resurrection couldn't happen.
Sure.
Because he had to be born.
He had to be born.
Before he could die.
Yep. But if he was born and died and didn't rise.
What?
If he was born.
Okay.
And then died.
Yeah.
But then did not rise.
But if he died and then was born.
Right. Obviously, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then Valentine's Day.
Don't even start with Valentine's Day. Yeah. So back to your original question.
Then when's Thanksgiving?
I don't know. I'm sure it's pagan too. Okay. All right. So, but people, I think some people also go to church because they're going with their families.
Okay.
Yes, they want to
on Easter.
On Easter.
Okay.
Yes,
your mom calls and says you're coming.
Right.
Okay.
Like, hey, it's Easter. Will you come to church with me? And so with the family. So I think that's a pretty common thing that happens as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't. It's not all bad stuff. And I as a pastor, obviously
Yeah. What do you think about it?
Yeah. As a pastor, obviously, I wish people were coming and being part of the church community. On a regular basis. I think so many people view coming to church as just like a chore or something to do, and they miss the community aspect of it, where we actually get to worship together, grow in our faith together, and you can miss that, if you're not involved in the life of the church. And so
I still don't think I get it.
Yeah, it's okay.
The community aspect.
Yeah, I mean that's where we grow to look like Jesus.
Yeah. So. Oh, well.
Yeah. We'll have to revisit that, I guess, sometime too. And so, so as a pastor, obviously, I wish they were involved in the life of the church, that kind of thing. But, obviously, if they're going to be there on Easter Sunday, then that's great. And I hope that, if you're going to church on Easter, that you're able to, hear a solid, biblical gospel message while you're there.
Okay, so this is confusing. Okay. But we celebrate Easter every Sunday, right?
If
this is the whole point of our faith, then don't we do this all the time?
In a sense.
Why does it have to be so special?
Right.
Like, if we're not going to time it so that we actually do it on the exact day that Jesus came back to life, then what's the point? What's the point if we just do since we do it all the time and it's
right.
I mean, you're a pastor,
right?
You talk about it all the time. That's all you ever talk about.
That's it. That's all I ever talk about. Well, I mean, honestly, it's a good question.
Okay.
It's a great question, actually. So, I agree with you in the sense of every Sunday, we are gathering, reminding ourselves that Christ died and he rose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we actually gather on Sundays, because that's the day he rose. And so that's a precedent that's been built in. And so in a way, you're right. But I also think that having a specific time to focus and center it is not only beneficial for us as Christians,
mm-hmm.
where we take an intentional time to, look at, to meditate and reflect on the cross,
mm-hmm.
to remember the resurrection, and to celebrate and rejoice in it. I think it's not only beneficial for us, but it's also something we're doing to pass on to our children. And so, in other words,
okay.
it's important, I think, for children to grow up, because they're not going to, as a child, you're not going to make those connections that every Sunday is Resurrection Day, right? Like,
okay.
You're just not going to. But you will remember something like Easter, which happens
right.
once a year.
Okay.
And it's a celebration of it once a year.
Because of the candy.
And hopefully the kids are told that the candy has nothing to do with Jesus, really,
right.
And so, but that for children, they're able to make that connection to that mm-hmm. Jesus died, Jesus rose. And I think it's a way of passing down our faith and the important things of our faith. It's why Jews have annual feasts
to remember
and
stuff.
Festivals. Yeah, to remember things. And I think it's a really important thing for us as Christians to do as well. Have these moments where we're intentionally remembering that Christ came,
mm-hmm.
that Christ is going to come again. That's what we do in Advent leading up to Christmas. That Christ died, that he rose from the grave.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do Good Friday and Easter. So that the Holy Spirit came. That's what we do with celebrating Pentecost Sunday. And you can just keep going on through the church calendar. I think these things are important.
Because Christmas is different, because nobody talks about baby Jesus at all at any point during the year except Christmas and him being born.
And that's fair. You're right.
Because we talk about Easter stuff all year.
Yeah, we do.
But nobody talks about the fact that Jesus was a baby ever, except
for during Christmas. I mean, that's a pretty spot on generality. Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
How much of Easter do I have to observe? Ash Wednesday to Easter Day.
Okay.
How much of that do I have to do so I don't end up in hell?
Okay. Well, according to Paul, he would say your festival days or your holidays aren't to be forced on people. In other words, they're not the things that are going to save you. Okay? So going to all the services, let's say you went to every single one of them they had, right? You went to Palm Sunday, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday. You even went to the church and sat there by yourself for an hour during Holy Saturday. Mm-hmm. And then you did sunrise service in the morning on Easter.
Sunrise service.
Oh, yeah, sunrise service.
More stuff to do.
I love sunrise service.
All right, well.
You talk about food. We have awesome food after sunrise service, too. So that's always good.
I haven't eaten at that time of the day. Maybe ever.
It's not like
sunrise. That's not a thing that exists in my mind.
It's not like it's that early. Like we're eating breakfast at like 7:30.
You kidding? Well, this was a bad question to ask.
Okay, so all right. So let's say you get all those things, including sunrise and the regular Easter service, and that's at the normal time. You went to all those things. That doesn't guarantee you to go into heaven. You missed all those things. That doesn't mean you're going to hell.
There's no clear answers in this religion.
No, there is actually.
Okay.
And the actual answer is that we're saved by grace through faith. So in other words, the fact that we trust in who Jesus is, that he did die,
All right.
that he did rise.
Okay.
We put our trust in him with that. That's what's getting us to heaven and keeping us out of hell.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
but I do hope you come to this stuff. Come to this stuff next year. Come to all this stuff.
I will.
Yeah, come to all this stuff next year. It'd be awesome.
All right.
I'll maybe throw in a Holy Saturday for you.
The come sit in the church and do nothing and shut up day?
Uh-huh. All for you.
Sounds awesome.
I know. God, does
Community.
Community. Yeah. Silently be.
Okay.
Silently be.
All right, fine.
Actually, that sounds really nice.
Are you trying to tell me something?
No, I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Wow. Some silence, not listening to other people sounds real good right now. Thanks a lot. Well, this has been the When I Heard This podcast. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at When I Heard This podcast, and X and locals at When I Heard This. Patreon, $5. Like, subscribe, share, comment, follow, download. Emphasis on the subscribe. I'm almost done.
Okay.
Ring the notification bell so that you never miss any more of this. Tell everyone that you know about the show. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Nate Robinson. You can follow Joseph on Instagram at
RevJoT.
This has been the When I Heard This podcast. We'll see you next Easter.
Bye.